Adika was the kind of man everyone in the city of Kumwasa respected and feared. Sharp suits, expensive cars, bodyguards at his beck and call. He had built a business empire from the ground up and wore his success like a crown. But beneath the polished exterior was a heart that had grown cold, a man who believed money defined worth. His pride in status was unmatched, and nothing irritated him more than people who settled for less. His younger sister, Lemba, was his opposite in every way. Where Adika saw power, Lemba saw peace. Where he chased influence, she searched for meaning. Lemba had a soft spirit. Her laughter came easily, and she loved helping others, even if it meant giving the little she had. While Adika spent his days in glass towers, Lemba would be in the village teaching children under a tree or helping aunties sell fruits at the market. She didn't crave riches, she craved love, honesty, and a simple home filled with laughter. Adika would often scoff at her choices, calling them childish dreams. To him, success was the only language that mattered. But to Lemba, love was enough. Their bond as siblings had always been close, but as Adika's pride grew and Lemba's dreams remained modest, a quiet tension brewed. Lemba knew she was different, and even though she respected her brother's achievements, she never admired his arrogance. She didn't want his world, she wanted her own. And when she finally found someone who shared her values, a man with no riches but a heart full of love, she knew her choice would challenge everything Adika stood for. What she didn't know was that her decision would change, not just her life, but Adika's forever. Lemba met Kofi on a hot Tuesday afternoon when her old bicycle chain snapped on the side of a dusty road. While most people just passed her by, a young man with oil-stained hands and a kind smile stopped to help. That man was Kofi. He worked at a small mechanic shop nearby, fixing motorcycles and cars for just enough money to buy dinner each night. He didn't have much, but the way he spoke, with hope, with kindness, with vision, made Lemba pause. They started talking, first about the bike, then about life, and from that moment, something gentle began to grow between them. Kofi was different from any man Lemba had ever met. He didn't wear fancy clothes or drive shiny cars, but he had dreams that reached the sky. He wanted to open his own workshop one day, teach young boys in the village a trade, and build something meaningful, not just for himself, but for his community. When he spoke, his eyes lit up like stars, and Lemba saw in him the very thing she always prayed for, a man who led with his heart, not his wallet. Despite his humble lifestyle, Kofi treated Lemba with respect, never trying to impress her with what he didn't have. He would bring her mangoes from the market, write her little notes, and tell her stories about his childhood, fixing things with his late father. Lemba found herself smiling more, laughing louder, and feeling safer than she ever had. She didn't care about the dirt under his nails or the worn-out shoes he wore. To her, Kofi was rich, in character, in vision, in soul, and slowly, quietly, she began to fall in love, not with what he owned, but with who he was. When Adika found out about Kofi, he was stunned, not just surprised, but furious. He couldn't believe that his sister, Lemba, the girl he had raised after their parents passed, had chosen to be with a poor mechanic. To him, it felt like a slap in the face. He had given her everything: school fees, a roof over her head, clothes from the best boutiques, and now she wanted to throw it all away for love, for a man with grease on his hands and dreams in his pockets. He called her into his office, where gold frames lined the walls and expensive cologne filled the air. His face was tight with anger as he slammed his hand on the desk. "You are throwing your life away," he shouted. "Do you want to be poor? Do you want to suffer?" But Lemba stood there, calm and steady, refusing to be shaken. She tried to explain that Kofi made her happy, that he was kind, that he loved her purely, but Adika wouldn't hear it. To him, love without wealth was weakness. He gave her an ultimatum: leave Kofi and return to the family home, or be cut off forever. Lemba chose love. With tears in her eyes, she packed her small bag and left everything behind. No inheritance, no support, no contact, just her heart and her hope. Adika was so angry, he told people he no longer had a sister. At family events, he pretended she didn't exist. He swore she would come crawling back. He believed life would teach her a hard lesson. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't see through his pride, was that Lemba was walking toward a life more powerful than anything money could buy. Lemba married Kofi in a small, simple ceremony under the big baobab tree in their village. There were no expensive gowns, no sparkling diamonds, no grand feast, just a few friends, warm smiles, and a quiet promise between two hearts. They didn't have much, only love, determination, and dreams that couldn't fit inside any bank account. After the wedding, they moved into a tiny one-room house made of clay bricks and tin sheets. When it rained, water leaked through the roof, and when the sun burned hot, the heat felt unbearable. But Lemba never complained. They faced real hardship. Some days they had to choose between buying food or saving for tools Kofi needed for work. Lemba walked long distances to fetch water, sometimes with a baby tied to her back. Their clothes were old, their shoes worn out, but their hearts were full. Every night Kofi would hold Lemba close and say, "We may not have gold, but we have each other." And every time she would smile and whisper, "That's enough." People in the village watched them, some with pity, others with admiration. While Adika's name was on billboards, Lemba's name lived in hearts. She helped neighbors, taught children to read, and sang as she cooked on the fire. Even in struggle, she shined. She never regretted choosing Kofi. His love made her strong, and their bond kept her joyful, even when the world seemed cold. Years passed, and while the hardships didn't vanish overnight, Lemba's spirit never broke. They built a life out of very little, and somehow it was more beautiful than any mansion, because in that small house there was laughter, kindness, and a love that even the hardest times couldn't shake. Lemba married Kofi in a small, simple ceremony under the big baobab tree in their village. There were no expensive gowns, no sparkling diamonds, no grand feast, just a few friends, warm smiles, and a quiet promise between two hearts. They didn't have much, only love, determination, and dreams that couldn't fit inside any bank account. After the wedding, they moved into a tiny one-room house made of clay bricks and tin sheets. When it rained, water leaked through the roof, and when the sun burned hot, the heat felt unbearable. But Lemba never complained. They faced real hardship. Some days they had to choose between buying food or saving for tools Kofi needed for work. Lemba walked long distances to fetch water, sometimes with a baby tied to her back. Their clothes were old, their shoes worn out, but their hearts were full. Every night Kofi would hold Lemba close and say, "We may not have gold, but we have each other." And every time she would smile and whisper, "That's enough." People in the village watched them, some with pity, others with admiration. While Adika's name was on billboards, Lemba's name lived in hearts. She helped neighbors, taught children to read, and sang as she cooked on the fire. Even in struggle, she shined. She never regretted choosing Kofi. His love made her strong, and their bond kept her joyful, even when the world seemed cold. Years passed, and while the hardships didn't vanish overnight, Lemba's spirit never broke. They built a life out of very little, and somehow it was more beautiful than any mansion, because in that small house there was laughter, kindness, and a love that even the hardest times couldn't shake. As the years passed, Adika's empire grew even larger. He opened more businesses, bought land across cities, and became one of the most powerful and talked about men in the country. His name was on magazine covers, his face on billboards. People bowed when he walked by. But with all his power came more pride, and his heart grew even colder. He never reached out to Lemba, not once. Instead, he used her story as a warning. At parties, in meetings, and even during TV interviews, he would laugh and say, "My sister chose love over sense, and now she lives in a hut, cooking on firewood." He mocked her life openly, calling it foolish, backward, and embarrassing. He would say things like, "She could have had everything. Instead, she chose a broke mechanic who can't even buy her a new dress." The people around him laughed, some nervously, unsure if they were allowed to disagree. Others joined in, treating Lemba's name like a joke. Adika acted like she had vanished, like she was a nobody, a forgotten branch of his great tree. But Lemba, even though she heard about it, never answered back. She stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of peace. She didn't need to prove anything. She knew her life wasn't easy, but it was real. Kofi still held her hand every night. Their children laughed freely. They didn't have riches, but they had love, respect, and peace in their home. Still, Adika continued his mockery. He thought he had won, that his life of power had proved him right. But what he didn't know was that life was about to turn in a way he never expected. Because while he was chasing gold, Lemba was planting seeds that would bloom far beyond anything he could buy. Adika stood at the top of his world, untouchable and proud. But he had built his empire not just with hard work, but also with secrets, dirty deals, bribes, and quiet threats behind closed doors. He thought he was too powerful to fall. But one day, everything started to crack. A major deal with a foreign investor, one that was meant to make him even richer, suddenly fell apart. The documents were leaked, bank records exposed, whispers turned into headlines. "Adika Mwalo under investigation for fraud," the news shouted. Within days, his name was no longer shining in gold. It was written in shame. Government agencies froze his accounts. Properties were seized. Workers walked out of his offices. Investors pulled out. Everything he had built over years vanished in just weeks. But the final blow came when police showed up at his mansion in the middle of the night. Sirens flashed, cameras clicked, and the man who once laughed at others was now in handcuffs, his head low, escorted like a common criminal. People who once called him Sir now avoided his calls. The same media that once praised him now tore him apart. He was charged with corruption, embezzlement, and forgery. And for the first time, Adika was alone. His phone was silent. His mansion, empty. There were no brothers, no friends, no loyal employees left to defend him. From a gold-plated office to a cold prison cell, his fall was louder than his rise. And deep in that darkness, he began to remember a voice he had silenced. Lemba's voice, the one that chose love and peace over power and pride. Now, stripped of everything, Adika was forced to face what he had become and what he had lost. The very sister he once mocked was the only one who had truly lived free. Adika never imagined this day would come. After his arrest, the court denied him bail, and the news spread like wildfire. The powerful businessman, once feared and respected, was now a symbol of disgrace. The few friends he thought he had, they vanished. His phone stopped ringing. Those who once laughed at his jokes now pretended they never knew him. Even his trusted business partners blocked his calls. Some even went on TV, denying any connection with him. He was left with nothing, no money, no home, no support. When he was finally released on bond, he walked out of the courthouse with nowhere to go. His mansion had been seized, his cars were gone, his bank accounts frozen. The guards at his old estate didn't even let him near the gate. He tried sleeping in a friend's guest house, but they turned him away with awkward smiles and empty promises. "We're sorry, Adika. You understand, right?" they would say, avoiding his eyes. The streets were the only place left for him. At night, he curled up on cold benches, using newspapers as blankets. The man who once wore silk suits was now wrapped in shame and silence. He avoided eye contact with passers-by. Some recognized him and whispered. Others just shook their heads. His pride, once bigger than the sky, had been crushed. Hunger bit his stomach. Rain soaked his clothes. And for the first time, Adika understood true loneliness. He had lost everything, not just his wealth, but the fake world he once called his life. No one came to help. No one cared. And in that silence, Adika began to wonder if this was the price of mocking those who chose love over riches. The very people he once looked down on now lived fuller lives than he ever did. While Adika struggled on the streets, something incredible was happening in a small village far away. Kofi, the same humble mechanic Adika once mocked, had been working quietly on a dream. Even during the hardest times, he never gave up on creating something useful for his people. Every night, after working long hours fixing motorcycles and broken machines, Kofi would sit with old wires, metal scraps, and solar panels he collected over the years. He believed he could change lives, especially for farmers in rural areas who had no electricity and no tools. One day, after years of trials and failures, Kofi finally built something that worked, a solar-powered farming tool that could plow land, water crops, and store energy for lights at night. It was cheap to make and easy to use. Word spread fast. Farmers from nearby villages came to see it, and they were amazed. Soon, a local university took notice. They helped him file a patent, and NGOs partnered with him to mass-produce the tool. Kofi didn't forget where he came from. Instead of chasing wealth, he and Lemba decided to give back. With the money they earned from the invention, they built schools, set up water systems, and donated farming tools across the country. They started a foundation to support young inventors and widows. Their faces began appearing on radio and TV, not for fame, but for inspiring hope. People who once looked down on Lemba now praised her name. She and Kofi became symbols of love, resilience, and purpose. While Adika had chased gold and lost it all, Lemba had chosen love and built something that could never be taken away. Their story proved that sometimes the ones laughed at in the beginning become the ones the world applauds in the end. One hot afternoon, Adika stumbled into a crowded community center, his clothes torn, his face thin and tired. His once polished shoes were now full of holes, and his hands shook from hunger. He didn't recognize the place. He was only looking for food, shelter, anything to help him survive one more day. A kind security guard at the gate looked at him with pity and let him in. Adika shuffled inside, clutching his stomach, his pride completely gone. The building was clean, filled with smiling volunteers and people laughing, eating, learning. Children ran around with books and fruit juice, and the walls were lined with posters about farming, invention, and kindness. Adika sat quietly in a corner, ashamed. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He just wanted a piece of bread and a little peace. He didn't know who owned the place. He didn't care. To him, it was just another stop in his hopeless journey. As he sat there, a woman in a long yellow dress walked in. Her presence was calm, graceful, familiar. She glanced at him, and for a moment, he looked up. His heart stopped. It was Lemba. But Lemba didn't say anything. She just nodded at the volunteers and whispered, "Give him fresh clothes, a hot meal, and a safe place to sleep." Then she walked away with quiet dignity. Adika's eyes filled with tears. He didn't know yet that this beautiful center, this place of hope and help, was owned by his sister and the man he once mocked. He had begged for mercy in the very house built by the love he once rejected. Life had turned full circle, and he was standing in the middle of a lesson he would never forget. The next morning, as Adika sat in a quiet corner of the community center, still overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events, Lemba approached him. She didn't look at him with anger or contempt, but with the same kindness she had always shown, even when he had turned his back on her. Adika's heart pounded. He had no idea what to say to her. He had betrayed her, humiliated her, and abandoned her when she needed him the most. But Lemba didn't speak of the past. Instead, she offered him a hand, not to help him up, but to offer him a future. "Adika," she said softly, her voice calm but firm, "I know you've made mistakes, but you're still my brother. I'll give you a chance to make things right." She paused, searching his eyes for a sign of understanding. "I'm offering you a job here at the center. We need someone to help manage the outreach programs, organize donations, and assist in the farm tool distribution project. "You've got skills, Adika. You just need to use them for something good." Adika sat there in disbelief. The man who had once controlled a massive empire now had nothing but the compassion of the sister he had abandoned. He wanted to argue, to tell her that he didn't need her charity, but deep down, he knew the truth. This wasn't about revenge or pity. It was about grace. Lemba wasn't doing this because she wanted to hurt him or prove a point. She was offering him an opportunity to rebuild himself, not because he deserved it, but because she believed in the power of second chances. With a heavy heart, Adika took her hand, humbled. He knew he had a long road ahead of him, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Remember, no matter how far you've fallen, it's never too late to change and find redemption. Sometimes, the most unexpected acts of kindness can transform lives. Keep believing in second chances.